What's up, everybody? Matt Outdoorsman here. Folks, let's talk about the Ohio train wreck, and I know everybody's talking about it, so just bear with me and hear me out. But listen, guys, it needs to be talked about, right? This is arguably one of the biggest environmental disasters in this country's history, all right? And just to add on to that, some people are calling it America's Chernobyl, and everybody, most people should be aware of Chernobyl, that nuclear disaster that happened about 40 years ago. And I know this isn't, East Palestine, Ohio, what happened over there with the train derailment isn't a nuclear spill, or it's not as potent as a nuclear accident. However, the impacts that it's going to have on the environment shouldn't be ignored. All right, guys. And, this is a prepping channel, and those folks over in East Palestine, Ohio, going through their own SHTF, right? This is what us as preppers talk about all the time. All right. And the environmental impacts that those people in that area of East Palestine, Ohio, and the surrounding towns are going to have to face for possibly several years to come is no joke, It's getting pretty ugly day by day. There's more news coming out on it. And the thing that goes up my ass about it is at first there was limited news coverage on it. I mean, we're talking about an incident that happened, on February 3rd, and here we are as of this video, February 17th, rather. And, more and more news outlets and people are starting to talk about this thing. As they should, It's just something that can't be ignored. So let me jump into, I paraphrased a news release. I looked at a few news articles regarding this disaster, and I just kind of put it, some of it into my own words and paraphrased it just to catch people up on what's going on out there in Ohio. So let's take it from the top here. So on Friday, February 3rd, at approximately 8:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a freight train owned by rail company Norfolk Southern derailed in the town of East Palestine, Ohio. The train was carrying 141 loaded cars, 9 empty cars, and 3 locomotives. Of those cars, 50 cars went off the tracks. 50. All right? So think about this, guys. A train carrying 141 cars. I was reading somewhere that this train was over 9,000 feet long. Okay? There's a little over 5,000 feet in a mile. All right? Chew on that for a second. So as a result of these 50 cars derailing and going off the tracks, toxic chemicals from the wrecked cars were spilled out and ignited into flames, emitting a thick column of toxic smoke and fumes. Some of the toxic chemicals that spilled out and burned included vinyl chloride, hydrogen chloride, and phosgene. Other chemicals that spilled out included ethylene glycol, monobutyl ether, and ethyl hexyl acrylate, as well as isobutylene. Some of these chemicals are known carcinogens, which is cancer-causing. In addition, in addition, exposure to these chemicals can cause burning and irritation to the skin and eyes, as well as breathing problems. So there you go. And phosgene, guys, if you didn't know, phosgene fume inhalation could cause chest constriction and choking. Phosgene also was used as a chemical weapons agent used against troops during World War I. Okay? So there you go with that. I mean, basically what people are breathing in was essentially a chemical weapons agent, you know, used to fight a war. All right. And American citizens are breathing this fucking shit in. All right. Phosgene. Excuse me. So moving forward here. The cause of the train derailment. They're saying it was due to mechanical issues on one of the rail car axles. As a result, a wheel bearing may have overheated, leading to a fire and causing a derailment. So, I also read somewhere too that I guess there was sparks and shit flying off underneath one of the rail cars 20 miles before the train derailed in the town of East Palestine. And I guess there's, from what I understand, there's boxes or sensors along the railroad line. And these sensors will kick off if they detect something wrong with the train, such as like a high temperature or overheating of the axles. And apparently one of these sensors went off and alerted the crew of the train and to that something was up, something was wrong, right? So, I mean, it's still in the middle of being investigated, and we'll see where it goes from there. So, okay, we're talking about the mechanical issues. And so, in an effort to contain the chemical spill, Norfolk Southern, under the supervision of experts and first responders, performed a controlled breach of several rail cars. So their reasoning behind this controlled release of deadly chemicals was to avoid a catastrophic tanker failure that could have resulted in a massive explosion, throwing fumes and shrapnel a far distance. And very interesting here, a hazardous materials specialist by the name of Silverado Caggiano told news outlets, quote, "We basically nuked the town with chemicals so we can get a railroad open," close quote. So apparently, he had a problem with the way Norfolk Southern was handling this issue. And he's a hazardous materials expert. Flat out coming out and saying that, in his own words, that they nuked the town to get a railroad open, all right? To get a railroad open. So what's that tell you? Money. It's all about money, right? You know, let's get this shit cleaned up, half-ass it if we have to, and just so we can get this fucking railroad open and conduct business as usual. Already sick to my stomach. So moving forward, guys, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, along with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, cautioned residents within a 1-mile radius of the wreck that remaining in the area could put them in, quote, grave danger of death, end quote. As a result, those residents were evacuated. Okay. But the thing is, so these residents of this town are evacuated at the behest of the governor, all right? And that's fine, you know. But my problem is that not even a week later, a little over a week later, but it was like just within days, these residents were told that it was safe enough to return back to their homes. And that was because of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So they indicated that air monitoring tests had not found any toxic threats. So they're basically like, all right, you know, we tested the air. Everything appears to be fine. So you folks that evacuated can come back home if you want to. However, East Palestine residents in nearby towns have seen animals such as foxes and chickens begin to drop dead. A resident that lives 10 miles away from the wreck site reported that all of her chickens turned up dead. 10 miles away, all right? So this woman, she goes out, feeds her chickens, and finds them all perished. And that's sad. And, I think she went on to report that all her chickens appeared to be fine before, this controlled burn took place. And they just showed no signs of being sick. But since this controlled burn and that big black column of smoke that, was in the sky that pretty much a lot of us have seen on the news already, had some kind of effect. I mean, it's obvious. So with that said, but the Ohio Department of Agriculture issued a statement assuring residents that the food supply is safe. All right? So chew on that for a second. You got livestock dropping dead 10 miles away from the wreck site. You got other wildlife that are dropping dead. You've got fish kills, thousands of fish turning belly up. And on top of that, there's a lot of agricultural land in that area that surrounds East Palestine, livestock, cows, there will be a growing season again pretty soon, this spring, so you got to think about all that shit that has settled into the soil from this burn, or everything that dissipated into the atmosphere. Now it's raining down all these chemicals, in the form of rain, because it collects in the clouds and then it comes down as rain, like acid rain. Everybody's heard of that. So there you go. But the Ohio Department of Agriculture issued a statement assuring residents that food supply is safe. And I mentioned the fish kills turning up, and they're turning up dead in creeks and streams as far away as 5 miles, guys. 5 miles. All right. I saw a video on Twitter, and it showed a woman standing on the side of a creek bed, and she pretty much she had a stick in her hand. She picked up a stick, like a limb off of a tree, and she just poked it into the water and just raked the bottom of the creek. I mean, the creek bed was probably 6 or 7 inches deep. It wasn't deep, she's just raking it. And it just showed oily water, like just coming up to the surface of the creek. And it was just disgusting. I actually shared it on my Twitter feed, for those of you on here that follow me on Twitter. But, EPA officials are saying that well water is safe for people to drink, So with all that said, guys, and that's pretty much the end of what I had to paraphrase here. And then I want to talk about something else that's related to this incident, about this news reporter that got arrested. I want to throw in my 2 cents on that. So with all that said, you got all these government agencies that are basically telling people, hey, it's safe to come back home. Hey, the water's safe to drink. Hey, the food supply is going to be fine. But people on the ground, real folks, that could be like, that are like you and I, if we were in that area, are saying otherwise. It's quite the contrary, right? And this is just another example, guys, how you can't trust Big Brother, If Big Brother says it's fine and it's safe, in my opinion, it's probably just the fucking opposite, And this is a prime example right here. The implications, the health implications and the effects on people, on wildlife, for years to come, it could be devastating, Again, like the soil where people, that's used to grow crops, the livestock that's being raised in those areas, the water, carcinogenic chemicals that are being released into the atmosphere and into the water and into the dirt. I wouldn't want to live there, and it's gonna be sad to see the the number of cases that are of cancer cases or people getting sick that are going to be popping up for years to come. You know, I'm sure we're going to look at this several years down the road, and people are going to be getting sick, and we're going to say, hey, remember what happened back in Ohio? You know, those folks were from Ohio, right? You know. So I want to talk about this news reporter real quick. So Evan Lambert, his name is he's a News Nation cable news reporter. Never heard of the guy. I have never watched the News Nation. Anyway, he was arrested while covering a news conference given by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. All right, and during that arrest, he was pushed to the ground and handcuffed. He was charged with trespassing and resisting arrest. All right, all for doing his job, all for covering a news conference, you know. And listen, there is no love lost between me and journalists because, in my opinion, most journalists are biased and they just sell propaganda, right? Most journalists do. I mean, there are some legit journalists out there, and, you know, hat tip to them that actually cover real news and do the real work to gather information and, you know, share that with folks like you and I, you know. So you got to understand, like, and this was like right at the beginning. So you got to understand, like, when I said, you know, the news coverage was limited on this, you know, and it makes you think, and it makes you wonder, you know. And some folks said, oh, well, he got arrested for interrupting the news conference. Well, I'll tell you what, do your fucking research, all right? Because he wasn't arrested for interrupting the news conference. He was arrested for doing his fucking job, all right? And with that said, the Ohio Attorney General dismissed the arrest charges, saying that he had every right to be at that news conference. Not to mention, the Ohio governor was one of those folks that were included in working to get this guy's charges dropped. So no, he wasn't interrupting the news conference, all right? There's a little something called the U.S. Constitution, and in it is called the First Amendment, all right? So right, wrong, or indifferent, you know, however you want to feel about journalists, it is what it is, but I know how I feel about the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment. And it applies to guys like me, and it applies to guys that have different political views than me. We're all Americans here, all right? So if you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, he shouldn't have been in that news conference interrupting it, shut the fuck up, okay? All right, because you don't know nothing, you don't got a clue. And that's all I'm going to say. I mean, I know I'm ranting about that, but, you know, that shit goes up my ass. But, yeah, anyway, guys, listen, I know a lot of people talking about this, but it needs to be talked about, you know. Like I said, this is a prepping channel. Those folks are going through their own SHTF over there, and this could happen to you or I, wherever we're at, you know, and it's just something to think about, something to prepare for. All right, folks? Anyway, that's all I have for today. Mad Outdoorsman. Thanks for watching.